Welcome to our Spiritual Awakenings International event. I am Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International. Welcome, everybody. We are delighted to see you today. Spiritual Awakenings International is truly international. We have now grown to be in, I have to look at the number, 86 countries around the world. So we're very, very proud about that. Why don't you please take a minute now and just type into the chat where it is that you're joining us from today. I am joining you. Oh, there's AJ from Colombia. I am joining you from Toronto, Canada. We have others from across the United States, and we've got AJ from Colombia. So welcome to everybody wherever you are from. So it is my great pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Marina Quattrochi. Marina Quattrochi is a former photojournalist, elementary school teacher, and secondary school English teacher with a lifelong interest in dreams, meditation, and spirituality. Through her business, Dreamscapes, she offers a variety of services, including yoga and Qigong classes, workshops, dream therapy, tarot readings, Myers-Briggs assessments, all with the goal of helping her clients form a deeper connection with spirit. She's the author of 2 books and is currently working on her 3rd. Marina has lived most of her life close to me in Toronto, Canada, but she recently moved to Smiths Falls, Ontario. So with no further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Marina Quattrochi.
Thank you, Yvonne, and it's my great pleasure to be here today. So I'll just begin right away. Okay, so my talk today is about believing in and activating inner guidance. So one of the things that I've realized through the years is that no matter what your situation is in life, no matter who you are, you always receive guidance. I'm just going to go back. So you can read this first quotation. The universe is not punishing you. It is not blessing you. It is not controlling you. Think happy and think happy thoughts will come to you. Think negativity and negativity will come to you. What we give out, we get back from the universe like an echo. So this is so important to understand. This is sometimes called the law of attraction. So whatever you're thinking, whatever you're believing in, will become part of your reality. So I'm just trying to, there's a box that's popping up at the right-hand side of my screen, and it's preventing me from reading. I'm just going to try to get rid of that box. Okay, there we go. Okay. Keeps on shifting around so that I can't read what I want to read. Just bear with me a second here. Okay, so we are dynamic energy beings. We're really a soul inhabiting a human body. And there's help available for us all the time. And whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, you may call it energy, you may call it life force, you may call it the intelligence of the universe. But what I've learned is that there's angels, archangels, spirit guides, deceased relatives are with us all the time. And they're always wanting to give us guidance or assistance. There's a woman that I really like, Lorna Byrne, who has had the ability to see angels her whole life. And she talks about the fact that there are unemployed angels all the time, just kind of waiting for us to ask for help. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. So the interesting thing about my life is that I've lived with chronic pain, daily migraines for almost 50 years now. I've experienced 3 dark nights of soul that I'm going to talk about and survived a fire where I almost died. But despite that, I've been able to do quite a lot of my lifetime. And I've always felt that I'm getting guidance. And the interesting thing is right now, one of the main things I'm doing is teaching yoga and qigong classes. And no matter how much pain I'm in, I can always pull it off. Like I always feel like I get some sort of grace or help or assistance as long as I'm doing something where I'm helping other people. So I'm going to go through all of the events in my life that I feel I've gotten assistance from. And some of these may seem like small things, kind of insignificant things, but when you put everything together, a picture will emerge and you'll see how guidance is always available for us. So as a child, I was a classic bookworm. I loved reading, and reading was really my escape. And I was very moronic in math. It just didn't make sense to me at all. And my mother's expectation when I was small was that I just get married and have kids. So there was never any talk about going to higher education, university, college, and I didn't receive any financial support to do this. So when I was, I think, in my final year of high school, we had to decide what career to go into, and I had no idea. I hadn't really thought about it. And so I read the classified ads in the newspapers, and I saw that there were lots and lots of ads for secretaries, which is now considered office administration. So I decided I was going to be a secretary, but I would have been a terrible secretary. So the first, I feel, divine intervention that happened for me was my grade 10 math teacher, Mr. Seven, and that's his picture. So I was failing math miserably, even though I would do math homework every single night, and I would try and I would try and I would try. With English, it just came so naturally to me. I had 100% in English. And one day during class, my math teacher, Mr. Seven, said, "Marina, I'd like you to stay after class." And I thought I was in big trouble, that I had done something wrong. But basically what he said to me was, "You're failing math, and I'll make a deal with you. If you agree that you will drop math, I will give you 50% because you only got about 25 or 30% now. So if you drop math, I'll give you a pass." And I was incredulous. So I decided I would take keyboarding instead of math. So I went right down, registered for keyboarding. And it was the best thing I could have done because I eventually became a journalist, then an English teacher, and then a writer. So this man really, really did help me. The second person who really assisted me was a vice principal at the time, Mr. Jokerek. He called me into the guidance office and said, "What are you going to do when you're finished high school?" And I told him that I was going to be a secretary. And he looked at my marks and he saw that I had really high English marks. So he basically did this selling job. He sold me on Ryerson's journalism department. And I ended up applying to Ryerson, getting accepted. But not having a lot of money or not really having, support that I could fall back on financially. So in my third year, I wrote kind of like what I thought was a really humorous story about how students struggle financially. And one of my professors called me into his office and he said, "Marina, was that story you wrote about you?" And I was embarrassed because I didn't think it was really making me the center of attention in the story. But I said, "Yeah." So he gave me this job back. This was before computers, so we were typing on typewriters. He gave me a job cleaning and servicing typewriters one afternoon every week, and that money enabled me to get through my final year. So that was my third angel. As a teenager, I was I was lucky that I met this amazing woman who was a psychic. Her name was Mrs. Rabb. And Mrs. Rabb lived in a farmhouse in almost abject poverty. It was just a one-room farmhouse with a table where she did readings. And she gave every penny that she made to an evangelist at the time, Oral Roberts. But she was so good that carloads and carloads of people would just wait to see her. And you couldn't really make an appointment at a specific time. You would just phone her and she'd say, oh, okay, come this afternoon. And you would just wait until you could see her. So I went to her several times, and one time she was doing a reading for me, and she used tea leaves. So you would just dump your water into the teacup, and she would look at it and she would study it. And one day she said to me, oh my goodness, I see a Snoopy dog. I can't believe how clear this Snoopy dog is. She said, do you have a Snoopy dog? And I said, no. Now, I think I was probably 16 or 17, I thought she was crazy. And the reading ended, and I thought, this is really weird. Like, why was she seeing this Snoopy dog so clearly? 2 years later, I was a cheerleader. We were in a competition, and all of the other cheerleaders got together. They bought me a Snoopy dog, and they gave it to me. Now, Mrs. Rabb had said to me, you are going to receive this Snoopy dog, and it's going to be a wonderful day, and you're going to be in front of crowds and crowds of cheering people, which made it even more bizarre. So the day of the competition, all the other cheerleaders gave me a Snoopy dog. They all signed it, and we won the competition that day, and we were in front of crowds and crowds of cheering people. That day, it never clicked. I never remembered Mrs. Rabb's prophecy. But then a few weeks later, I had the Snoopy dog on my dresser, and I'm lying in bed at night, and I look at the Snoopy dog and I realize, oh my goodness, this woman saw something in detail that was going to happen 2 years before it happened. So this made a huge impression on me, and I realized that you can receive a lot of truth and information from the other side. Mrs. Rabb told me many things, and a lot of my friends were going to see this woman. She told one of my best friends, who later became a doctor, to stay away from a fast, blue-moving vehicle because there would be a terrible accident. So my brother had a boat, and we all had gone out in this boat. But the day before, or the evening before, I was at a party, and I felt like something pushed me from behind. It was the most distinct feeling that someone had kind of put their hand on my shoulder and pushed me really hard. But I looked behind and there was nobody there. But I fell and I twisted my ankle, and it was a really bad twist, and I had to have tensor bandages put on it. So the next evening, we all went out in my brother's blue boat. There was a group of us, but my ankle was really hurting. So I asked my brother if he could drive me back home so I could get out of the boat. So I got out of the boat. Two of my cousins who were there got out of the boat. They went back out, and 15 minutes later, there was a fatal accident, just as Mrs. Rabb had predicted. And my younger sister, Kathy, and my best friend, Susan, were killed in that accident. So this is a picture of my sister, Kathy. Now, I had spent a lot of time with Kathy and Susan before their deaths. So this taught me many, many things about death and dying. And one of the things it taught me is that although our mind doesn't consciously know when and how we're going to die, our soul absolutely knows that we're going to transition. And Kathy and Susan did a lot of really unusual things in the days and weeks leading up to their passing. My sister Kathy was only in her 20s, but she bought a gold luxury Monte Carlo, a huge car that is not something a typical teenager would want to drive. Now, the interesting thing was my mother had never, ever owned a new car in her life, and it was something that she always wanted. When my sister Kathy bought this car, she left it in my mother's name. in case anything ever happened to her. One evening, a few weeks before she passed, we were just talking, and she said, you know, if I ever pass away, I want you to give my horse. She owned a beautiful Appaloosa horse. I want you to give my horse to this woman, and I want one red rose in my coffin. A few weeks before my sister did pass, she had gone to see Mrs. Rabb, and Mrs. Rabb told her she would be going away on a major trip, and all her friends and family would be crying. And that was absolutely true. Now, this is my friend Susan McBride, who passed away. The day of the boat accident, Susan insisted that we visit this friend who was going to get married. And she was engaged to this man she didn't really love, but this man was very manipulative and was trying to really, persuade her to go through with it. So Susan insisted we had to go and visit this friend, and she spent about 2 hours trying to talk her out of getting married. And then the accident happened. My friend called off her wedding, and she ended up marrying the love of her life, her high school sweetheart, who she's been married to for about 40 years. And this was the same friend who Mrs. Rabb had warned to stay away from a blue, fast-moving vehicle. So lots of synchronicity in my life. So about 2 weeks before this accident happened, I was in a drugstore and I picked up a copy of Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. Now, I was quite young. I was in my early 20s, hadn't really thought a lot about death and dying. The thought of death absolutely terrified me. And I read this book and was absolutely mesmerized. And the accounts of people who had near-death experiences were so comforting. And it totally took away any fear I had of dying. In fact, the book made such an impression on me that I actually looked forward to the time that I would pass. And that book, whenever I would get really depressed or really down about the accident, I would just think of that book, and it would give me incredible solace and comfort. Right after this happened, my mother developed bowel cancer. Now, all through these episodes of losing my sister and friend, she was always kind of holding her stomach. And we realized that was because she had cancer of the bowel. She spent 4 years going in and out of hospital. She had a colostomy. She had lots of operations. Just a few weeks before her passing, we were sitting together on the veranda of our cottage. Now, my mother was not a calm, serene person. She was very nervous, anxious. She worried about everything. But all of a sudden, her whole demeanor changed. She was smiling. She was peaceful. She had this look of serenity on her face that I will never, ever forget. And she was looking up at the trees. And she told me that she saw a man there. And I said, well, what does he look like? And she said he had dark hair and a beard. And I said, well, talk to him. Maybe he has a message for you. I kept on trying to see this man. And she was saying, he's right there. He's right there. He's as clear as day. Can't you see him? I could see nothing because this man was there for her, not me. But she told me that he kept on saying to her, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. And just seeing this peace and serenity on her face just helped me so much to deal with her death. And her death happened a short time later. I had decided to go back to school at this point, to teachers college. And it happened, my mother actually passed the first week of teachers college. So I had worked as a photojournalist in the very competitive field of photojournalism. And while I was working at the University of Western Ontario, I started to have, I was always a dreamer, a very vivid dreamer. And this was the beginning of the real guidance I began to get from my dreams. So I had a dream one night And at this point, I had just kind of really established myself in journalism, which was a very tough field. And usually, you know how a dream has content and you see things and you experience things. Well, I woke up this one morning and I couldn't remember what I dreamt. There was no visual memory at all, but I was euphoric. I was higher than a kite. I felt like I was walking on air. Everything was beautiful. Everyone was beautiful. And this natural high lasted for the rest of the day. It didn't just go away after a few hours. But I woke up with the absolute certainty of knowing that it was my destiny to become a teacher and that it was all going to work out. Now, Jung called this a big dream. And he says we have maybe one or two big dreams in our lifetime, and that these are very much life-altering events. So this was my first big dream. So the emotions behind this dream were so powerful that it really sustained me to apply to Teachers College. I got into every place I applied, which really, really surprised me. But then the first day of classes, you know, my ego kicked in, and I began to really doubt myself and doubt the dream, because we were sitting in a round table. There were about 24 people. And every single person in my class had extensive experience working with children. And I had absolutely none. I'd never even babysat. My whole reason really was the dream and my niece and nephew, who were quite young at that time, Lisa and Frank, who I absolutely adored. So I loved being with them. So I thought, you know, probably like being a teacher. So this first day of classes, everybody goes around and introduces themselves and talks about all the wonderful things they had done with children. And then it was my time, and I had nothing really to say about children. I just said, well, I've been a photojournalist, and, you know, the two people that I really enjoy photographing the most are young children because they're so spontaneous, and seniors because they've usually lost their ego. And I said that, and I thought, oh, that's so stupid. And I wanted this trap door to open up and to fall into it. And I thought, I've made a huge mistake. But the dream was right. Despite the fact that I had no experience with children, I was the first person in my class to get a job. I had a job in February before the year had even ended. And then it was another very vivid dream that helped me actually land my first teaching job. So what happened was I'd applied to all these school boards, and I had two interviews on the same day. One was in London, Ontario, and one was in Mississauga. And the interviews were an hour apart, which was impossible. So I had to choose between one interview or the other. So while I was trying to make this decision, I had a very vivid dream. And in the dream, I'm trying to ride my bike to that job interview. And I'm trying to go to the job interview in London first because it's closest. I was living in London. And I keep on having obstacles. I keep on hitting dead ends, and then dead ends, like dead end after dead end. So in the dream, I think, oh, this is impossible. I'm just going to drive to the interview in Mississauga. So all, you know, as happens in dreams, you know, you can magically do anything in no amount of time. So my bike just begins to fly, and I'm there in a few minutes. And you know, it was a really, really telling dream. So at this point in time, you know, it's very different now, but no one was really talking about guidance from dreams. This was back in the early 80s, and I was almost embarrassed to tell anybody about this dream. But I did tell an instructor that I kind of trusted, and I was almost prepared for him to say, oh, you know, that's stupid. You can't believe what a dream tells you. But he said, oh, you absolutely have to cancel your interview in London and go to the interview in Mississauga. So I followed his advice, and I got the job right away. Okay, so the next big event in my life happened in 1985. I had only been a teacher, I guess, for 2 or 3 years, and I was teaching grade 1 in a 1-2 split in this idyllic little country school north of Toronto. But I had gone home for Christmas. and was staying at our family cottage on Rideau Lake. And I was making a type of pastry using hot oil. And I'd left the oil on the stove. And when I did that, there was an explosion on the stove because I left it too long. And I came back and everything was burning. The walls had ignited. The walls were burning. Everything was on fire. And I panicked and I thought I could pick up the pot and just take it outside and just dump the burning oil in the snow, which was the stupidest thing I could have done. It was really windy that day. There was tons of snow. And as soon as I opened the door, the wind caught the flames in the pot, and it just kind of leapt or transferred onto my body, and my whole body ignited. And I remember feeling like a second or two of the most excruciating pain. And then I just jumped outside and I rolled and I rolled and I rolled in the snow. And it was the snow, I think, that probably saved my life. So I felt this excruciating pain, and then I felt nothing at all. And I had no concept of how severely I was burned because I'm sure I went into shock. I remember going back into the bedroom and trying to put my clothes on. I remember thinking, well, I should probably go to the hospital, but I couldn't get my clothes on because everything would stick. And so I thought, okay, I'll just put my nightgown on. It's really loose. And I put on my winter coat and my boots. And the nearest neighbor was about a 15-minute walk. So I remember just running there in my winter coat and boots. And the lady that answered the door, a neighbor, this was a farm, opened the door, and I'll never forget the look on her face because I looked like something from a bad horror movie. I'd lost all my hair, eyebrows, my face was unrecognizable. She drove me to the nearest hospital, and then I was immediately transferred to the Ottawa Civic Hospital. But when I was leaving emergency in the hospital in Smiths Falls, there was this wonderful nun who knew my family. Her name was Sister Mary Pablo. She looked into my eyes and she knew how bad this was going to be. I had no idea. And she said, Marina, your attitude will be everything. And those were the wisest and most healing words I probably received at that time, because when she said that, I decided I was going to stay really positive and that I was going to recover. So I arrived at the Ottawa Civic Hospital, and what they do to test you to see if it's third-degree burns or second-degree burns or first-degree burns is they have a pen. That was what they used at the time. And they would just put this pen on my arm and they would say, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Because if you have third-degree burns, it's burned past your nerves. And so you can't feel anything. So I didn't feel anything over most of my body. So I had third-degree burns quite severely, 45% of my body. I remember them putting me on a morphine drip and feeling like I wasn't getting anything for the pain. I remember begging for more and stronger morphine. And they placed me in intensive care, and I was hooked up to all kinds of life support machines and breathing machines. And when you're burned, usually you don't die of the burns, you die of infection because, your skin naturally gives you a barrier so that germs don't come in. And without any skin, you're so susceptible to all these burns. So most burn patients with the type of burns that I had go into a sort of coma for 2 weeks, and they're sometimes in and out of consciousness, and then they often just succumb to the infection. So it was questionable whether I would survive the night. My family came to see me, and then they closed the door and left me alone because the risk of infection was so high. And I remember seeing this big wooden door close, and then all of a sudden, something happened. I think I began transitioning to the other side. I think I had a choice that night whether I remained or whether I went to the other side. Suddenly in front of me, and none of this seemed unusual or out of the ordinary. So right up above me, I began seeing clouds, misty, swirling clouds. And I was squinting because there was faces in the clouds, and I was trying to see if I could figure out or differentiate the different faces. There was probably about 20 people, and they faded in and faded out, but I couldn't really tell who any of them were. And when this was happening, this excruciating pain started to subside. Now, years later, I went to the Art Gallery of Ontario, and I was just riveted. I saw this picture, Concert of Angels, and I thought to myself, oh, wow, this was just like my vision. And simultaneously, I realized probably many other people have seen something like this. The only difference in my vision and this painting is, you can see bodies very clearly in this painting, but the vision that I had, it was just faces. So that vision just kind of absorbed me for a few minutes. And then immediately after that faded, it gradually faded. To my right, I saw my mother, who had now been dead for about 4 years. And what I believe now that what I was seeing was her soul body. And our soul body is so radiant and so beautiful beyond words. So she was glowing with this energy, and she was smiling at me. And she wasn't speaking to me with words. She was speaking telepathically. And she was just looking at me and saying over and over again, everything is going to be all right. Everything is going to be all right. And that image of her was so distinct and so clear. It's something I'm never, ever going to forget. Simultaneously, I began to feel this energetic transmission, these waves of love and warmth enveloping me. I watched in complete bliss, and then I fell asleep. And I wasn't expected to survive the night, but I did. And I didn't ever go into a coma. I was completely lucid for those first 2 weeks, when burn patients are usually not lucid. So this is one of my favorite pictures of my mother. From that point on, my healing was pretty miraculous, because 45% of my body had 3rd-degree burns, and they had to do skin grafts. So they took the skin from the other 45% of my body, and they even took a bit of extra skin because the grafts don't usually take the first time, and they have to repeat skin grafting, usually 2 or 3 times. So the areas where they took the skin hurt just as much, if not more, than the burns. And what was miraculous was all of my skin grafts took the first time, and I didn't need to keep on having repeat surgeries. I started walking all around the hospital that first week, and I remember leaving. I was burned so badly. I remember there was a trail of blood everywhere I walked, and the nurses would just come and sort of clean up after me. But it was like I was completely oblivious to how badly I was injured, and I was planning at that point in my life. I was doing 10K runs every second weekend, and I was planning my next 10K run. My family was amazing. My brother came in and he made a pulley system for me so I could learn how to start to use my arms and my fingers again, and I could pull myself up. So when I actually started physiotherapy, I was already doing everything that they had planned for me. So I was constantly walking up and down the halls, trying to get better, trying to get my energy back. And there was a young woman who was beside me in the room. And she had burns to only 17% of her body. But when I say only 17%, that is still really severe for a 3rd-degree burn. She hadn't gotten out of bed in 4 months because the pain was so bad. So the nurses kept on saying, go in and talk to her, go in and talk to her. But I was kind of hesitant. I really didn't know what to say to her. I finally went in one day, and I didn't really talk about me at all. She really just needed to talk to somebody who had gone through the same experience. So I just listened to her. The next day, she got out of bed and she walked, and the nurses were just ecstatic. So this whole time I was in a sort of naive type of bliss, and I had no idea how serious my condition was. A friend had phoned me who was a physiotherapist for children who had been burned. And she said to me, "You're really lucky you made it." And I went, "Made what?" Because I had no idea. I had no idea that I had almost died, despite all these visions and everything. Ignorance is bliss. So when I was in the hospital, I was in a special air chamber burn bed that kind of levitates you. So because it's so painful for anything to touch your skin, I needed to be fed. I couldn't use my hands. I couldn't use my arms. I needed occupational therapy for months to just do very simple tasks. A priest came in to see me, and I remember him describing me as a fried chicken. People would come into my room, look at me, and just burst into tears. And at that time, they wouldn't let me see what I looked like in the mirror. And I remember asking a doctor, what's my face gonna look like? And he wouldn't tell me because they really didn't know. But after I left the hospital, I lived with my sister Chris in Ottawa, and I would travel back and forth by bus to go to occupational therapy. And there was one of my nurses on the burn floor in the bus, and she didn't recognize me because my face had healed so dramatically in a short time. And I went up to her and I said, "Hi, I'm Marina. Remember me? I was one of your burn patients." And she looked at me with this like amazing look of awe. And she said, "Oh my God, you have a face." And so, yeah, that was quite remarkable. So we take our skin for granted, like I said, because it prevents us from getting all these germs and infections. So what I had to do to assimilate my skin was wear a pressure garment. They're called Job suits, and they assimilate your skin. But the only place that made these was in the United States. So I would have to get measured for these suits. They'd have to be sent away to the States. And when I got my first suit, I will never forget this because I had to have it on my entire body, and my arms, my finger. I had gloves, and it took 2 hours for me to be able to put this suit on myself. But after a few weeks, I was able to do it in about 45 minutes. And I went back to work, but I had to have 2 suits, one that I wore, then one that I washed. And eventually this amazing woman, Roberta Harris, opened up a company in Canada that made these Job suits. So we didn't have to always order them in the States. She was another angel for me. So that's what a Job suit looks like. And I was wearing these gloves all the time. So with someone who has the type of burns I had, your hospital stay is normally for at least a year. But I was released after 1 month, and I went to live with my sister Chris in Ottawa. And I think it was because of my sister that this was really possible. She was there all the time visiting me and helping me. In less than a year, I was back and I was teaching elementary school, and I was teaching fitness classes wearing my Job suit. And when I look back on this, I really think that there were 3 factors that led to this healing because it was really unprecedented. The first thing was whatever this transmission of energy from my mother was, it was miraculous. The second was my family support, especially my sister Chris. And the third thing was the support and love that I received from family and friends. It was absolutely amazing. And every time someone would visit me, every time I would get a phone call, a card, a present, I could feel this as love and energy that was helping me heal. So it felt to me as if it was the worst of times, but the best of times, because I'd probably never felt so loved in all my life. So I always say to people, never underestimate the power of even a 5-minute hospital visit for someone who really needs your love or your help. So I believe that I survived because I needed to learn things. I needed to do things. I needed to be of service. And I believe those faces in the clouds were souls who had gone through um, a similar experience. And it would have been easy to just slip away, because the feeling of euphoria and peace I was feeling was better than any kind of drug or alcoholic drink you could ever imagine. I didn't want to believe that it would take me 5 years to heal, like the doctors had said, because everything else was so miraculous. But it did take 5 years. And I went back, I was teaching, I was working on my master's degree. And while I was working on my master's degree, I'll never forget one time I was in class. And when your nerve endings start to grow back, you feel electric shocks. And there was one time where I was literally jumping like this when the nerve endings were growing back. And I remember being so embarrassed and hoping nobody was seeing my body jerking around. So one of the big things I was meant to do after I was burned was to do dream work with secondary students. So I applied for a position in a secondary school, and I was hired by this wonderful man, Wayne Marchand, only I didn't have the qualifications to teach secondary school. And I was very naive. So he hired me. I was really ecstatic. And then he kind of phoned me in the middle of the summer and said, Marina, no, it was actually before the middle of the summer. He phoned me in June and said, you don't have the qualifications. So I had to go to school, take a course in the summer, which I did. Now, he could have just hired someone else, but he was another angel. He allowed me to work for him. And I started to do a doctoral degree in educational psychology. And when it came time to do my dissertation and decide on topics, I had 3 ideas, but my committee said to me, "You've got to do dreams. It's what you're most passionate about." And no one at this point had ever really investigated or done dream work with secondary students in Canada. So I was really pioneering something. And dream work was a risky topic at that time. Like, a lot of schools wouldn't allow teachers to do it because they considered it the work of the devil. And a lot of people said to me afterwards, how were you able to do this? But I remember asking my principal, Wayne, should I send home a letter to parents to tell them that I want to do dream work with their students? And he said, no, I don't think you need to. He said, I think it's going to be fascinating. So it was like everything was in place for me so I could do this. There were 2 novels on the curriculum. One was The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin. That's about a man who tries to suppress his dreams because he's dreaming things and they're actually happening. And the other one you've always probably heard of was Shoeless Joe, which was adapted into the movie Field of Dreams. So because dreams had always guided me in a very positive way, and they were always right, I wanted to help my students understand this and to begin working with their own dreams. So while we were doing this novel, we would devote the last 5 or 10 minutes to discussing their dreams. And at first they thought I was crazy and they were very reluctant, but it took about 2 weeks before they were all really remembering their dreams. And they would hyperventilate. They were so excited. They could hardly wait to share their dreams. And the whole experience was successful beyond anything I had ever imagined. These students started discussing dreams with parents. They started ending negative relationships. They started taking up creative things. It helped them with career choices. But the one thing that it did that I really hoped as an English teacher was it helped them transfer the symbolism in their dreams to the symbolism in literature, because I would be teaching a novel like The Old Man and the Sea, and this man had wounds in his hands, and it was supposed to be symbolic of the wounds of Christ. And I would tell them that, and they would say, "Miss, you're really, really you're really going to extremes here." So after they started to see symbolism in their own dreams and how it worked, they did start transferring it to literature. So throughout the process of writing my doctoral thesis, I was guided nightly in my dreams. So I would go to a meeting with my thesis advisor, David Hunt, and he would tell me 15 things to do. And I would leave and my head would be swimming. And I'd think, how am I ever going to do this? And I would dream word for word every change I had to make. And I really couldn't write fast enough. So I wrote most of my doctoral thesis through this dream dictation or channeled writing that I began doing. So defending your doctoral thesis can be really stressful. You're in front of a panel of several professors that are all experts in the field. But the thing was, no one had done this before. And so there were no experts that they could bring in. So they just brought in this wonderful man from the States who was interested in dream work. And so they couldn't really challenge me, because they were there really, they told me later, more to learn than anything else. Now, the night before my oral defense, I've never been an extremely confident person, but I slept like a baby, and I had two vivid dreams. In one, I am leaping and jumping through electrified rainbows. And in another, I have this mystical raven land on my lap and talk to me. And I woke up euphoric, just the same as that night that I woke up euphoric and knew that I would become a teacher. I had a very deep inner knowing that the oral defense would be okay and that I would be successful. So we had this wonderful academic discussion, and then you're asked to leave the room, and that the committee deliberates. Usually it can be for several hours if they're not in agreement. But I was outside for 10 minutes, and then my thesis advisor said, "Congratulations, Dr. Catroci," and I knew I was successful. So it was my dreams that helped me. So there's never really been any question in my mind that I survived the fire, because there was things that I needed to learn, and that there's things that I needed to do. So after 20 years of working full-time and studying and with daily chronic migraines, I completely burnt out, and my family doctor really ordered me to stop working, and I plunged into a really deep depression. And this was one of my dark nights of soul that I'm going to talk about. So dark nights were first coined by St. John of the Cross. And it happens when we experience a dark night, it's because we're living mostly, I believe, through our mind and our ego, and not allowing our soul to guide us. So we go through some sort of an identity crisis or ego death, where we're asking all those big existential questions like, why am I here? What's the purpose of life? What am I doing now? And I believe now, when I look back on it, it was really grieving the ego me, the ego personality part of me. So I had 3 dark nights, and in each dark night, there were important things I believed I had to learn. My first dark night was when my sister and my best friend and my mother died. And the thing that I had to learn there was, your earthly family is only a temporary family. It's your earthly incarnation family, and it's not your ultimate or your true family. You may belong to a completely different group of people that you will meet again when you leave the earth. Sometimes it's all the same people, but it's not always your true family. Number 2, after I was burned, I believe I was grieving the loss of my physical body. And what I had to learn there was that my physical body was not who I really was. My spiritual body is who I really am. And number three, when I burned out and had to quit teaching, I had to reframe my whole thinking. I had to realize, yes, I could still be a teacher, but not just for one school board. I can branch out and to do other things. So I believe that ultimately we all work for God or for spirit. And as long as we're serving our fellow human beings in some way, this is the ultimate key to happiness. And it's a huge illusion that we work to make money or riches. We're really working for God, and we're working for the greater good. And you transcend the need to have any dark night when you realize that, and when you connect with your soul or your spirit. So after I was burned, a couple of things happened. I began to see auras or light around people. The first person I saw light around was my niece, Lisa. And she wanted to come and visit me. And I remember saying, no, because I was just thinking she's going to be so horrified when she sees how I look. But she came to visit me, and I remember seeing her, and she was just glowing with this white light around her. Her soul is just so beautiful. And then when I returned to teaching, I could see auras around some of my students, and it was easier with people that I realized were more spiritual or innocent or pure. And this became a type of barometer for me. And then several years later, something really interesting happened. My left arm was burnt the worst. It was burned almost right down to the bone, and I had no nerve endings. So I started to feel this very strong electrical current in my arm. And I realized that this electrical current, it's happening right now, is telling me that I'm on the right track, that I'm connected. It's like a Kundalini energy. And sometimes when I'm doing a talk, someone will ask me a question and I'll start talking. And if my arm activates, I know I'm on the right track. So it's become a wonderful sort of barometer for me. When I stopped teaching, I started to just spontaneously channel poems. And this was really wonderful because it was effortless. The words would just flow. And then, I'm working on my third book now, and I did so much research. I probably read closer to 200 books. And then I thought, how am I going to put this together? I've really over-researched. And what happened was really interesting. I stopped having the traditional dreams, and I would wake up every morning and I would channel pages and pages and pages and pages. I basically had the entire book channeled to me, and now I have to just put it all together because it wasn't channeled in chronological order. One night it would be about God, and another night it would be about heaven. So I'm so grateful because it made the process so much easier. So one of my favorite books has always been Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi. This book made a huge impression on me. So I decided to go to Encinitas, California, where he wrote this book. And we were going to go into his hermitage where he wrote it. And there was a monk briefing us before. And for reasons I can't explain, I started sobbing and sobbing uncontrollably. And I remember being really embarrassed and not having any Kleenex. And I was crying the whole way there. And then the door opened into his hermitage, and I felt this huge infusion of energy and light and love. And it was similar to this energetic transmission that I got from my mother, but way stronger. And it took me several days to really kind of feel normal again. But on the way back from California on the plane, I had been experiencing really severe arthritis in my back for 20 years. And I noticed, gee, I don't have arthritis in my back anymore. And then I had another really interesting experience with Yogananda. I was at the center in Toronto that I used to go to, and I was looking at a picture of him. And just like, in those Harry Potter movies, the picture started changing, and I could see how his face changed in his last lifetime. Then I could see previous lives, and then I saw him, and he was in Africa, and he was Black, and I knew with absolute certainty I had been a student in that lifetime. So another amazing thing that happened to me was I was going to a pain clinic, and I was seeing a doctor, and he had said to me, Marina, if you can find a really good Qigong teacher, I think it'll really help you with your pain. There was a teacher there, but she had just left. So it took me 5 years to find a teacher. I finally found this woman, Vera Stern, who had completely healed herself of fibromyalgia from Qigong. So I did the classes with her, and I realized this is amazing. I have to teach it. So I went for the next teacher training, which was really that the first year that I was doing Qigong, I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and usually you do it for several years before. So you have to get up in front of the Qigong master and present, and it's very intimidating because he's walking around you, checking to make sure everything is perfect. And there were 3 people before me, and they were all unsuccessful. And so it's my turn, and I'm thinking, well, it's okay. I've learned a lot here. If I don't make it, that's fine. But I actually was successful. And I think the reason why I was successful was because I had an offer to start teaching right away. And I love teaching Qigong. It's incredible. So the next amazing thing was I'd always wanted to own my own house, and I'd never, ever been able to afford it. I started to have dream after dream after dream where I was seeing these big holes, and I didn't understand why. But the big holes were the main street of Smiths Falls, where I had grown up. And to make a long story short, I ended up moving to Smiths Falls. And right after I moved to Smiths Falls, they started to dig these big holes, which were exactly the same as the holes that I had seen in my dream. So I actually did something I never, ever did before. I wrote down everything that I wanted in a house, and everything came true. I was able to get this beautiful house. This is a picture of part of the garden that is absolutely, breathtakingly beautiful in the backyard. And no one else put a bid in on this house. So I was able to get it for below the asking price. So to end, I think it's important. What I've learned in life is to always believe, no matter how difficult life is, to believe this too will pass. There's always light at the end of the darkest tunnel, and tunnel vision is not believing that there is that light. And I love this quote: the greatest honor we can give God is to live gladly because of the knowledge of his love. A Julian of Norwich. And another quote: the greatest gift one can give God is to be pleased with his creation. Do you think God likes to be around people who are happy or people who are miserable? So I think our challenge in life is to continually believe in and keep this connection to spirit going, because if we do, everything just works out. Everything will be all right, like my mother said, and you don't ever have to be miserable, despite how difficult things may seem, because, I've learned God usually has greater plans for you than you ever imagined. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Marina. I'm now going to bring on our board member, that is Brian Sackett, who is going to be moderating the question and answer period. Brian, go ahead, please.
Great. So thank you so much, Marina. That was just an inspiring talk to listen to, and I just love the message of the uplift. the overall uplift of the talk.
Thanks, Brian.
You had mentioned you started channeling poems. So would you mind to share a short one of your poems, please?
Sure. So when I started writing initially, like because I used to be a photographer, I would take beautiful pictures of nature, I would write a poem, and I would put them together. And so some of the poems were birthday, some were sympathy, some were encouragement. So this was a birthday one. And it just kind of came out in about like 3 minutes. So it goes like this. Don't count the candles on your cake, for they do not reveal the gifts that age has given you, your assets that are real. Don't count how much is in your bank or what you earn each day, but count instead the times in life you've shown someone the way. In God's bank account, there isn't room for money, cash, or gold. We're never judged by body parts we feel are growing old. The hours that you work each week impress no one up above. Instead, they count all the times you've shown someone your love. So count instead every occasion you didn't judge or blame. Count harder any time you made sure others did the same. Count all the gardens you have grown, the roses you have smelled, and all the people you have helped or babies you have held. Count each time you've laughed out loud or danced happily, or every spring or autumn when you've planted a new tree. Count each and every sunset you've watched in great content, and all the times you felt at peace, no matter where you went. And when you've totaled up these points, then you will surely know that age is not the years that pass, but how we truly grow. So
It's
every
beautiful.
poem had kind of a spiritual
Yeah.
bent to it. Yeah. And they were so easy. Like I always say, I didn't write them, I just took the dictation.
Great. Thank you. I have one more question and then I'll just ask some of the others. How can you be sure that when you are channeling something, it's something that's really channeled as opposed to something you're just making up?
Yeah, that's something I really doubted myself in the beginning, and I think because it was so easy. And that's one of the ways, I think there's about 4 or 5 ways. The one thing is well, especially for this book I'm writing, it's something that I didn't know before. It's always things that I didn't, my conscious mind did not know this. So it's new or different or fresh. The second thing is there's just such an ease, I had struggled, writing essays and doing things with my mind, and that's the hard way. The easy way is just to surrender to your spirit and let the information just flow or channel through you. So the ease, it's effortless when you channel something. That's another big way. The third thing, I guess, is it's really fast. I was saying when I would get this dictation for my doctoral thesis, I couldn't write fast enough. Like it comes out very quickly. And then another thing that's really interesting is, when I go back and I read things that I've channeled for this book, it's like my mind has no memory of writing this because my mind didn't write it. It's almost like I have to read it a couple times before I understand it because it did not come from my mind. So you forget what you've written sometimes. But the big way I think is that if it's channeled and you put it out in the world, it ultimately does help other people. Like when I started to write these poems, I get really, really great positive feedback, more than I'd ever gotten with anything that I'd written before. So that kind of really, really helped me understand it wasn't me writing it. Yeah. Thanks for
Thank you.
asking that, Brian.
Sure. Thank you. Yvonne wonders, do you think the ability to see auras was an after effect of your near-death experience, and you still see auras?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I never really put it all together. Like it just happened so fluidly and effortlessly when I saw you know, when I saw my niece Lisa and I saw all this light around her, she's very innocent and pure. So it's really easy for me to see the light around her. But I hadn't ever seen it before. And then, you know, I started reading all these books like Yvonne's, you know, about her near-death experiences. And I started reading what people believed were the results of their near-death experience. And it was almost, you know, I was getting these aha moments like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I had developed all these abilities that I didn't have before I was burned. So yeah, I didn't have any of these abilities before. I was very spiritual and I was always interested in anything spiritual, but I definitely didn't have those abilities before I was burned. I was very much in my head and my mind and my ego.
Thank you, Marina. Karen wants to know, have you had any experience with animals having souls and that they transition to the spirit world and are still contactable?
Oh, yes. Oh my God, I could do a whole webinar on the, yeah, many animals that have passed have come back to me in dreams. And it's the coolest thing because you can talk to them. Like my dad had this dog, Coco, and I adored this dog. It was a Dachshund, and Coco passed away, but I didn't know Coco passed away because the dog had been given away to someone else because my stepmother couldn't care for it any longer. So I had this dream. I woke up one night and I had this very vivid dream. And in the dream, I'm at a party and there's a knock at the door and I go to the door and I open it and Coco's there, but he's a Dachshund. And I went, oh, Coco, you know, like I really wanted you to come and live with me because I was going to maybe take the dog, but then I realized I couldn't because the place that I was living couldn't have dogs. So I'm going, Coco, I miss you so much and I love you and I really wanted you to come and live with me. And he went, I know all of that. And he turned around and he walked away. And that was the whole dream. Well, 2 weeks later, I'm with my father and he said, Marina, yeah, I've got something sad to tell you. You know, the people that took Coco, they said he passed away. And he told me when Coco passed away, and it was the exact time that I had the dream. So I've always believed that dogs and animals all have souls. There's many books that have been written about animal souls. We, because of our egos, we believe that we're superior. And you know, in some ways we can do things that animals can't do. But yes, my personal belief is that every animal has a soul and you can communicate with them and they come back to you in dreams and communicate with you. And I'm very fortunate that I have a really good friend who's a psychic medium, and she's been able to communicate with people that have passed. But one relative in particular that I was able to communicate with said to me, I'm here and I'm with all 18 of my cats that I used to have. And I didn't really know, but she had 18 cats until I asked my sister. And my sister said, yeah, she did have that many cats. So not only can we communicate with animals, but they follow us and they're with us, I believe, when we transition over. Because the bond of love is never ever broken. Mm-hmm. And I read somewhere, this really had an impression on me, that the more love you give an animal, like, you know, I believe that one of the things I'm talking about in this book that I'm writing is that, you know, we're all meant to constantly evolve and grow, and that animals evolve and grow. And you know, some people don't believe that you can be an animal in a previous life, but some do. But if it's true, what I read, and it absolutely resonated with me, is if you give an animal a lot of love, like really a lot of unconditional love, you make it much easier for that animal to evolve into their next incarnation, which could possibly be a human incarnation. Mm-hmm. So I can't prove that, but I think it sounds right to me.
Fascinating. This is from another universe. R2D2 wants to know, she said that, or he said that after a spiritually transformed experience has many psychic abilities and I'm aware of and speak to my spirit guides so much that I have to ask them to stop talking to me. How can I have a better balance with my guides and the other side?
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I think what you've said, you've already answered your question. I think that because I had a friend who was a psychic medium and who told me the same thing. I think you just have to tell them, I need my alone time. I need my downtime. You cannot talk to me right now, or come up with your own balance. Like you have to just tell them, or they will always be communicating with you, which is a bad. Like I would actually like that, but if you don't want that to happen, you just tell them because they absolutely have to respect your free will and your wishes. They can't intervene unless you they won't intervene unless you ask them. But if they're intervening more than you want them to because of free will, they have to respect that law and stop if you ask them to stop. So I think you just have to be very firm about saying, no, you don't interrupt me when I'm doing this and this and this, or between these hours, or you have to put up boundaries and parameters for them.
Great, thank you. Linda wants to know, have you had dreams about a significant world event before it happened?
I haven't, but I meant when I was doing dream work with my students, many of my students did. That my students taught me so much. I went into the whole thing almost very arrogant, thinking, I've been doing dream work for years and years and years, and I'm kind of the expert. But they taught me so much. Many of my students dreamed about events before they happen, because what happens when you're in the dream state, you go off the linear time track. So we are subject to space and time when we're in our physical bodies. We're not when we dream. So you frequently go forward in time and observe things. And then usually you forget about them, but not always. But you are able to go forward in time and to see things, to prepare emotionally. So it's very, very common.
Okay, thank you. I think probably many of us would like to know, what can you do to increase the guidance or to develop the ability to channel?
Okay, so first of all, I think not only do we all have this ability, but we're all meant to have this ability, because we're all meant to be in constant communication with the divine or with God or with angels. We're not expected. I used to think I had to do everything alone. And I used to feel very alone, and I used to really I was very academic, and I would depend on my mind or my brain or my ego to figure things out. And that makes life very hard. I think many movies are channeled, many books are channeled, pieces of art, like movie scripts. There's so much channeling going on, but we just call it other things. We might say it's our muse or our inspiration. But if you want to increase it, the first thing I think you have to do is believe that it's possible. Because if you don't believe that you can channel, it just won't happen. You have to make the transition from using your mind to trusting in your spirit and your soul. And I think it helps to actually repeat that phrase, not my will, but your will be done in my life. The intent, I think, is really important. Like, why do you want to channel? What are you channeling for? Because if you have a very clear intent, if you know you are channeling because you want something to be of service, I think it's not ever denied, as long as you're providing a service. So your intent has to be very clear. And then I think you have to ask. And sometimes, like what I did with getting the house, write down what you want. And as long as it's something that's serving the greater good, I really believe it happens. I hope that answers the question.
It does. It does. So thank you so much. I just love this talk and love the gift you gave us of such an uplifting message. So thank you very much. Yeah, I'm turning this back over to Dr. Kason, and Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Marina, for an absolutely incredible, inspirational presentation. I know people are going to love
You're
watching
welcome.
this video.